And quite a blessing for me. I wanted to mention, though, it's not like I'm a full-time speaker on creation, but I have a job. I work for a living, and I'm a computer programmer by trade. I've been doing it for about 40 years, and I'm counting down to when I can quit. Anyway, I thought you should know that. I know people, sometimes when they see you presenting something, they think, well, that's your life. I have a lot of other things I do, too. Anyway, I got this guy to keep me company, so we can get started here. This is session number 6, Evolution or Creation Seminar. And this was entitled Paradise Lost. And I always put my email address at the beginning of the bottom so that you can write me if you want. If you're going to write me, please put creation in the subject line so I know that you're talking about this. Anyway, last session we looked at starlight. We presented several options for why starlight has taken so long to get here, why light from billions of miles away could have gotten to the planet Earth. We also looked at solar system formation and how there's several different problems about the way our solar system in particular, but most solar systems in general, are formed. We looked at comets, that short-period comets actually get blown away by the sun's rays fairly rapidly, and that it is actually probably a timer that says our solar system can't be that old. We looked at dust in space, dust in the moon, and we looked at the flood theory that might explain where the comets came from and all this dust. We saw the sun and the earth and the moon and the changes they're going through and how they kind of point to a young earth. And then we saw solar luminescence. God spoke and there was light and what that could be done. And we touched on Gentry's papers. Knowing this first, well, before I go anywhere in the Bible, you should ask God to join you and pray and ask His Spirit to be with you who inspired it. Heavenly Father, we ask you to come with us and sup with us. Enlighten our minds to the aspects of your creation and salvation, that we might learn more today and praise your name even with higher notes. In Yeshua's name, amen. Knowing this first, that scoffers will come in the last days, walking according to their own lust, saying, where is the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of creation. For this they willfully forget, it's kind of dumb on purpose, that by the word of God the heavens were of old, that God spoke the world into existence, and the earth standing out of the water and in the water, by which the world that then existed perished, being flooded with water. This is actually a prophecy that was given about 2,000 years ago that described how people would quit believing in the creation and the flood. Well, it's only been in the last 150 years that people have quit believing in the creation and the flood. That's a pretty good prophecy. It's hard for getting prophets to even tell what's going to happen tomorrow. And here's some that's 2,000-year-old prophecy that's come true. Now, there's been some floods around here, like Katrina. Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans, and here's a before and after picture. You can see the devastation. So what was it like before the flood? Well, here we have the before and after image of Sandy. Hurricane Sandy had hit the East Coast. Now, I don't know if it looked like that before the flood, but I know that the Bible gives us some idea that people lived quite a bit longer than they do now. The average age before the flood was 912 years. That's a long time. Today, we're lucky to get 70 or 80 years. So why did they live longer before the flood? Well, I'm going to look at a couple of different things, and I hope to show you that there was a good reason for people to live longer before the flood. We'll start with Genesis 1:29. God said, see, I have given you every herb that yields seed, which is on the face of all the earth, and every tree whose fruit yields seed, to you it shall be for food. Well, herbs, that's kind of like lettuce, broccoli, spinach. And then we have fruits. We have the sweet fruits and non-sweet fruits, apples, figs, bananas, bell peppers, and peas. And then we also have seeds and nuts. Actually, it was an all-raw diet in the beginning. And then after the fall, there were some changes. We got some curses. Thorns and thistles shall it, the ground, bring forth to you. And you shall eat the herb of the field. In the sweat of your face you shall eat bread, till you return to the ground, for out of it were you taken. For dust art you art, and dust you shall return. Now it says the herb of the field, and then it also, in that same reference, refers to bread. So I take it to mean the herb of the field are the grains. And it's kind of interesting. At the time you take in bread, then you also have to start sweating. I wonder if there's some sort of detoxing that's necessary with bread. Here's a book by Doug Graham called Grain Damage. Now, they were still living long periods of time after the fall, so this has not shortened their life dramatically. Now, I do recommend a book, Back to Eden. It's a film, actually, not the book. Back to Eden talks about simple, sustainable solutions. It kind of looks at the woods and says, they don't switch over crops in the woods, and you have a nice deep composting that's happening kind of constantly. Some folks don't like to put mulch and whatnot on. I have taken Arkansas clay and rock and turned it into dirt. So I'm impressed with it myself. Now, you think about the diet we just looked at, and you wonder, is that really God's diet? Another diet that we see in the Bible is from Daniel. Says, but Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's delicacies, not with the wine which he drank. Therefore he drank. I requested the chief of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. Now, my wife and I, we have a joke. Anytime we're at some place and they say, oh, this is a delicacy, that it's probably something really disgusting. Or abomination, I don't know, something bad. And it says, please test your servants for 10 days, and let them give them pulse, a vegetarian diet, to eat, and water to drink. Now I thought about the the delicacies also, and I can just imagine that any of the meats that the king would have had on his table would not have been bled. As a little hint for any of you who are eating meat, if you go out to a restaurant, it's probably not going to be kosher meat. So every time I go out to eat, if I eat any meat, it's going to be kosher meat at all. And you could talk to my wife about how you might want to kosherize meat if you want to go into that direction. Now, I also recommend a video, Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead. We found that helpful in witnessing, and it's kind of taking a vegetable juicing and living basically on vegetable juices, and they've seen some dramatic improvements in people's health just with that one thing. Now, there's a number of Bible diets that we see. We see the garden diet, the original diet. We saw post-fall tacked on. Then we see the post-flood, where there were clean meats added, no blood. And then Daniel came along, and he had his diet, John the Baptist diet, and then there's a renewed diet in heaven, where even the lion is going to be able to eat straw. So something's going to change. Now, I've had people tell me about, they love Ezekiel bread. And it tastes good. I can't eat wheat myself. But you have to remember the story of Ezekiel bread is talking about some curses involved in there, where they were cooking it over dung. So, I don't know, maybe you can look at that a bit. So we actually have two different views of how the body's health should be done. I'm trying to push this button. There we go. Two philosophies of health and medicine. One is the creation philosophy, which says the body was designed by an all-wise creator, And he designed the food that was perfect to supply the needs of the body, and that you can use nutritional therapy to heal the body. And evolution, which says, oh, we're just a bunch of random chemicals that came together by chance, and you can just add a few more chemicals in the form of medicines and fix it. Well, there's some disturbing numbers been reported. This is a medical report from 2003, Death by Medicine. And there's a variety of authors in this. And they found that 783,000 people die a year from conventional medical mistakes. Wow. That is stultifying. How many have died from grapefruit? Right? Now, I personally, and you all can have your own points of view, and I respect that, but I personally don't want to go to a doctor unless I am busted up or split open. And then I want to get away from them as quickly as possible. Now, another reason that people may have lived longer before the flood, and I'm going to look at another reason, so we're going to start reading the Bible to show us another reason. Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. Firmament. What's firmament? Well, some might think, oh, well, you have water, and then you have some land, and then some another water somewhere else, so it's the dirt. Well, let's read a little further. It says, let the birds fly above the earth across the face of the firmament of the heavens. So the birds don't fly in the dirt. So that means it's the atmosphere. So we have water below and above the atmosphere. Well, today we have 6 layers in our atmosphere. We have the troposphere, stratosphere, ozone layer, mesosphere, ionosphere, and thermosphere. Perhaps there was a 7th layer in our atmosphere. Kind of a nice number, huh? And it says, and God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament, under the atmosphere, from the waters which were above the atmosphere. And it was so. Well, some have talked about this as a hydrosphere. And being close to space, the hydrosphere would be cryonically cold. And it would, cryonic hydrogen is metallic. It's also a superconductor, so it interacts with the magnetic field around the planet, which helps keep it in place. And it's also fiber optic. Now that causes an interesting attribute. If you were to shine light on one side of the planet, the light would then travel also around to the backside, and you wouldn't have total darkness. That would be kind of nice. Now we have some verses that talk about, and God made 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night, and he also made the stars. So maybe the lesser light could have been this fiber optic. Now I know actually in Psalms there's a place where it talks about the moon in the lesser light, so perhaps not. But this hydrosphere actually has some very helpful properties. For instance, whoa, again we're just flying through here. If I can get back there, I don't know. Okay, here we are. That's scary, huh? Anyway, the hydrosphere would block UV and X-rays. Now, they cause damage to our skin and our body. So, people who get too much sun, they start having aging happening. And before the flood, you wouldn't have had that problem. Now, it allows light rays to come through and radio waves. Actually, there's a funny story about this could also cause the light from the stars, when they hit this, to have sounds so that you could hear the stars as the stars rotated through, as the earth rotated and the stars changed, the sound would change. The stars would sing to you. Now, it mentions here that the Meissner effect is used to hold this in place. Now, it also says, for Jehovah Elohim had not caused it to rain on the earth, and there was no man to till the ground. But a mist went up from the earth and watered the whole face of the ground. So, no rain? So why would there be no rain? Well, this canopy actually increased the atmospheric pressure on the surface. And when you have a weather system coming in, if it's a high pressure, it's clear weather. Now, Dr. Baugh studied this a little bit, and he said that it would also have a slight pink tinge. And a pink tinge actually is calming. So you could get your rose-colored glasses and be calm. You know, there's some prisons or jails that actually have pink rooms. So when they bring somebody in who's somewhat violent, they put him in a pink room and it calms him down. Now there's other advantages to this pressure increase. Some think it was about 2 atmospheres of pressure. It's beneficial in health, in the health of your body. Here's a single hyperbaric chamber, and they use it for medical purposes. It has a number of health benefits. West Germany, actually it's now just Germany, they used to take stroke patients in there, and they take them in as soon as they have the stroke. It's very important to be early, and they do an intensive 3-week session, and they find great improvements in stroke patients to do a hyperbaric oxygen therapy. And it's even paid for by insurance companies. England deals with multiple sclerosis. France deals with arthritis, vascular necrosis, advanced liver disease, a variety of things. Japan has them, Sweden, India. I mean, it's used quite frequently. Johns Hopkins uses it. Mayo Clinic uses it. Dr. Baugh at the Creation Evidence Museum in Glen Rose, Texas, he's gotten himself a large hyperbaric chamber. And he's done some studies with hyperbaric chambers. This one here is about the size of a submarine, and it's in his museum. You can go look at it. And in it, he's got a large aquarium. He's got plants, and he's been doing some studies. He did some studies with a smaller chamber that he put a rattlesnake in. And what he found when under the microscope, before you put a rattlesnake in the chamber and you test his venom, it looks fractured. But when you put it in the hyperbaric chamber for some time, and then you look at its venom, it looks like beautiful patterns. And it's not poisonous to humans. That's interesting. Now there's a variety of personal hyperbaric chambers that can be purchased. However, you might find it very difficult because they may restrict it to medical institutions. You can kill yourself in these things. You need some training in how to, balance the air in there and whatnot. I was happy to see that Dr. Holquist at his place at Eden Point had a hyperbaric chamber. He reported that some of his patients had noticed that they felt better. Now that he has a fairly short program and not enough time to have this hyperbaric chamber, which takes some time for it to have some effect on you. Anyway, Dr. Kimori at the University of Tokyo, he raised a cherry tomato plant, and he pressurized CO2 to the stem, and he put a greenhouse cover to protect it from UV radiation. And his cherry tomato plant got to be 16 feet tall and produced 907 tomatoes. And his cherry tomatoes are about the size of baseballs. They're still doing this. They have one plant that continues its life year after year. It's not an annual plant anymore. Interesting. Would have worked better if he'd pressurized the whole plant. Now, a number of pro teams use hyperbaric chambers. They say they just get healing twice as fast. Come on back. Don't go there. I don't know why it does that. But I guess Satan doesn't like this message, huh? Come on, get back here. Okay, we're about there. Whew. That's disturbing. One thing in a hyperbaric environment, you can get your blood saturated with oxygen with no ill effects. And I think about that verse that says you can run and not get tired, not get winded. Now, some of you may have heard of the story of baby Jessica. Baby Jessica was walking in her backyard, and she stepped into a uncovered well pipe that was there in the yard. It was an 8-inch pipe, and she did the splits going down the pipe, which is not good. She slid further and further down. They couldn't reach her from above. They ended up having this huge television story. It took them 58 and a half hours to get her out. They had to dig down with these huge machines and punch through below the pipe and then pull her out. Well, when they pulled her out, one of her legs was entirely black. You could see on her arms, she's got some black spots. Now, that's not a good sign. Generally, when it goes black, it's kind of dead, and they usually cut it off to save the rest of the body. Well, one of the doctors thought, well, this poor little child, instead of just cutting the leg off, why don't we stick her in a hyperbaric chamber? So they did some treatments, and pretty soon her leg turned pink, and then her foot started turning pink, and then toe after toe started turning pink, and all but the pinky, and they had to cut that off. Hyperbaric oxygen. And there she is, modern. Recently, they just called her Baby Jessica, but they came out and showed who she was. And now, some other scientists have been studying the world, and they saw there's a real problem that maybe the lack of oxygen, not the asteroid, killed the dinosaurs. I just thought it was funny they would so quickly throw the asteroid theory out the window and say, oh, well, we got another theory. But anyway, what they found is that the 80-foot Apatosaurus, similar to this Brachiosaurus, had a set of nostrils the size of a horse. And so it's hard to breathe all the air needed to sustain a large body like that through horse nostrils. So they think maybe that's what killed them. They couldn't breathe enough. Well, under a hyperbaric environment, it would make things a little different. Plus, they've done some studies of bubbles found in amber. It's a little bit like Jurassic Park, where they took amber and found things in there. Well, in here they found some bubbles from ancient times. And they've studied these bubbles, and they found that there was 50% more oxygen in the air in the past. So today we have about 21% oxygen. They used to have about 32% oxygen. So a hyperbaric environment plus more oxygen. That's how the Apatosaurus could live. Come on. So they lived longer, and we had a number of reasons. They had good food. They weren't bombarded by X-rays and UV radiation. They had a hyperbaric environment, and they had higher oxygen content. So they could have lived longer, but were they taller? Well, let's ask the Bible on that one. There were giants in the earth in those days. Well, I guess they were taller. We find giants in the ground. As we do a little digging, we find here is a 6'11" man in an Italian coal mine. That's a big guy. Here's a skeleton, 12 feet tall, found in Lompoc Ranchero, California in 1883. Now, they reburied the remains, so maybe they're going to dig them up again. We also found a 12-foot tall person found in Tucson, Arizona in 1891. He had 6 toes, long hair, and a bird-shaped headdress. I guess he was a pagan. Now, I like to use examples that are from old newspapers, and the reason is there wasn't any paint shop or Photoshop to go fake things around back then. So I see a lot of things on the internet. They could be right, I don't know, but Photoshop has ruined witnessing. In Walkertown, 20 miles southwest of South Bend, Indiana, a group of amateur archaeologists opened a mound in 1925 and unearthed a skeleton of 8 giants, ranging from 8 feet to 9 feet long. They were wearing heavy copper armor. Well, through the bungling of these diggers and the total disinterest of the archaeological museum establishment, these discoveries have now been scattered and lost. So why do you suppose the archaeological museum establishment had no interest in giants? This is how you protect a theory. You don't bring in any evidence that would contradict it. It's unfortunate it is no longer anywhere near science. Now, I saw a website that had a map of where ancient human remains and giants have been found in America, and they found them in a few places. Actually, it's actually probably a good thing there aren't any giants in the world anymore, because it would totally ruin the game of basketball. Now I have to look at that verse we looked at about giants. There were giants in the earth in those days, and after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children unto them, the same became mighty men, which were of old men of renown. Now, some people would like to use the theory that these sons of God are fallen angels. Now, I know in the New Testament it's pretty plain that the sons of God are following Yeshua. And so I have a hard time believing that the sons of God listed here are fallen angels. And if you think about it, if you had the ones following God going after the daughters of men, that might be going after Cain's daughters from the land of Nod, leading them astray. And then I see mighty men of old, men of renown. See, they want to make some of themselves. They're not humble. They're prideful, and they want to control people. That would be men of renown. Ellen White said that Adam was 12 feet tall, a giant. Now, there's other big creatures we've seen. Here's a 5-foot wingspan on a dragonfly. Here's a giant roach. Now, I have to ask, did the fallen angels have relations with the roaches? This is just disturbing. I don't know. Now they have had 2-foot size grasshoppers. They have an oyster. Here's this guy taking a break on an oyster. He's digging in the rocks, had a hard day. But they found oysters that were 11.5 feet wide.
Any pearls?
That is a big oyster. I don't know if they found any pearls inside. Now, the interesting thing about oysters is they don't find them open. You know, when an oyster dies, little microbes go along and they eat the edges and they pop open. When you find them on the beach, that's the way you find them, open. These are all closed. And you know from our study on fossils, in order to be fossilized, you have to be buried rapidly with water. So these closed oysters show rapid burial in water. Here we have foxtails that were 60 feet long. Wow, that's a big foxtail. Here's a rhinoceros that's 18 feet tall. That's a hornless rhinoceros. You know, the world we live in is a junkyard compared to what it was like before the flood. Now, I still think you can go into nature and you can see God's handiwork, and it's still some great beauty around, but things were so much better back then. And I look forward to when God recreates it. Then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. But praise Jehovah, Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. You know, I hear those folk say, oh, well, the Old Testament is law and the New Testament is grace. Well, they didn't read about Noah then. Actually, there's grace throughout the Old Testament, the older testament, as we've heard. Now, there were 8 people on the ark: Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, and his 3 daughters. And they were in the ark for 40 days and 40 nights. It rained 40 days and 40 nights, but they were in the ark for considerably longer. Now, the ark itself, that says it's 300 cubits by 50 cubits. Well, what's a cubit? Well, the distance from your elbow to your tip of your finger, that's a cubit. It's a measure. And it's estimated the Noah's Ark was about 450 feet long. It's interesting, the Noah's Ark floated and the Titanic didn't. But 18 inches is what they commonly talk about, a cubit in length, and some of the archaeological finds show that 18-inch cubit. However, there are references in Ezekiel 40, verse 5, to a larger cubit. You might call it the royal cubit. You see, if you have bigger people, you have a bigger cubit. Now, when they talk about Noah, of course, they talk about him landing on Mount Ararat. That's in eastern Turkey. And the ark rested in the 7th month, which we've learned some about, upon the mountains of Ararat. Notice it says mountains. There's the area there is called the Mountains of Ararat. There is a mountain called Mount Ararat. Well, some think that Noah's Ark is on Mount Ararat and that it broke off and some of it came down some a ways. Now, the conditions of this mountain are not really conducive to mountain climbing. There's some great crevasses. There's some minor earthquakes in the area, as well as a lot of sharp, broken-up rocks. And it's very treacherous to climb on there, not to mention this is sort of a troubled region of the world. Also, Ron Wyatt thinks he found Noah's Ark about 17 miles away. Now, Ron Wyatt, if you're not familiar with him, he's a Seventh-day Adventist. He's passed away now. But he found a number of places around Israel. He found Sodom and Gomorrah. He found the crossing place over at the Gulf of Aqaba. A number of wonderful things, and it's worth looking into. Anyway, the ark that he found, he measured it. It was about 415 feet long, which would make about a 20 and a half inch cubit. So it's a little bit bigger person. Here they also find around there these about hand-sized iron rivets. They also have the Turkish government confirmed, yep, this is Noah's Ark and we found it. They put a visitor center there. Actually, I thought it was interesting. He was an anesthetologist, puts people to sleep. Anesthesiologist. He puts people to sleep. That's funny. He would be the one to be waking us up about this sort of thing. Anyway. He found these large stones around the site. This one here is 9,000 pounds. There's others of different sizes. And they have this hole in the top. Now, if you look at these holes, they're interesting because they're oval. Now, when we drill holes, we drill them nice and round. I don't know, how do you drill an oval hole? Now, the bigger stones had bigger holes. Now, some think that these were used as drogue stones, sort of to anchor the boat in the water so it wouldn't be overwhelmed by some of the huge waves. It's possible. I mean, they weren't going anywhere. Now, around the world, we have legends of floods, and basically every people group of the world has a big flood legend. You'd expect if we had a flood that there'd be flood legends in every people group, and gee, we do. There's over 500 flood legends worldwide, and they've done a chart to try to compare the different aspects of the flood legends and how much they agree. Here's one, Hawaii, long after the death of Kinohoa, the first man, the world became a wicked, terrible place to live, and there was a good man left. His name was Nu'u, or Noah. He made a great canoe and with a house on it and filled it with animals. The waters came up over all the earth and killed all the people. Only Nu'u and his family were saved. Interesting legend. Here, the High King legend. It's a classic Chinese legend. And it talks about Fu Hai, who the Chinese consider the father of their civilization. In the story, Fu Hai, his wife, his 3 sons, his 3 daughters escaped the great flood. He and his family were only people to survive on earth, and they repopulated the world. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Now, this is an interesting thing. The Chinese characters, the character for vessel or container, plus 8 and a word for mouth. If you put a container with 8 mouths in it, it's a boat. The Toltecs said that the First World lasted 1,716 years. Well, that was only about 56 years different than the Bible account. The Babylonians had a flood legend. Anyway, I want to shift gears a little bit and look at some flood evidence. We're going to go down to Glen Rose, Texas. Now, Glen Rose, Texas is southwest of Dallas-Fort Worth. And out there is the Paluxy River. In about 1930, there was a large flood in the area, and it ripped up large chunks of limestone and pushed them down the river. And then when the river receded, they saw these funny footsteps all in the rock. Well, now this is about the largest dinosaur trackway in North America. Well, when they were looking at these different dinosaur footprints, this large one here was taken to the American Museum. Here it is in the museum. And we look at these footsteps. Well, this would be a very bad place to be at one time in history. In 1930, Roland T. Byrd, field explorer for the American Field Museum, reported 15 to 20-inch long, clearly defined human footprints with the dinosaur tracks. Now, I want to be plain about this. If humans and dinosaurs existed contemporaneously at the same time, it fully destroys the evolutionary theory, which has to have millions of years of separation between them. It basically collapses the whole geologic column down to a flood. So there's a footprint. You know, I kind of look at what was going on when this happened. It was not a good time for anybody. They actually saw a footprint of a dinosaur with a broken toe. And they discovered that dinosaurs don't know how to limp. Or maybe he was in a really big hurry. Anyway, here's a footprint found on one of the branches of the Paluxy River out in Glen Rose, Texas. This is called the Burdick footprint. Now, the creation deniers, if I can coin a term, they looked at this dinosaur footprints and the human footprints, and they said, well, the dinosaur footprints are real, but the human footprints, they were carved by the Indians. Well, what they decided to do was they were going to cut this footprint across the toes, the metatarsal, and the heel. And you see, when mud is laid down like that, it would have lamination lines. And if the Indians had carved it, they would have chopped right through the lamination lines. But what they found was they were compressed lamination lines where the footprint was. So these were at the same time. They were not carved by Indians. Here's a set of footprints. And it's interesting. These footprints from heel to heel are 7 feet. Now, I know I'm about 6 feet tall. I would do the splits every time. Now, putting this guy at the end of the trail, it really kind of makes you visualize it, doesn't it? Here's Dr. Baugh. His left hand is touching a human footprint, and his right hand is touching a dinosaur footprint, side by side. Now, I went out with a group to go see Dr. Baugh and be with his group for a day. I actually paid good money to be out in the hot Texas sun in the middle of the summer and work with him, trying to move huge boulders. All right, maybe I'm not quite that smart. Anyway, I got to meet him. It's funny, I was going to take a picture with my arm around him, and he goes, well, let's take a picture as though we're just meeting, because we were. I thought that was pretty smart of him. Anyway, I've only met him a couple of times. I don't know him but I am impressed that he's a humble and a very brilliant man.
Amen.
Now here's the Alvis Delk print. It has a dinosaur stepping on a human footprint. How interesting. You know, the creation deniers, they'll say, that print is too good. Boy, that shoots it right down, doesn't it? My evidence is too good. I'm sorry. I'm going to look at something that's kind of fun. Let's look at ooparts. Ooparts are out-of-place artifacts. They're out of place if you believe in evolution. They're not out of place if you believe in creation. So let's look at some of these. But before we do that, Anzilla, she also bare Tubal-Cain, an instructor of every artificer in brass and iron. And the reason I bring this up, this is very early in the Bible, and it's talking about people using alloys. Here we have copper and zinc alloys. So don't think of them as primitive. They were actually quite intelligent. Here there's a cast iron pot that was found embedded in coal. That's pretty interesting evidence. Now it looks to me like it might have been used to melt metals that were a little bit melted easier, and then you could pour it out one side or the other. There's a use for that, maybe. We had workers found human bones and a well-tempered copper arrowhead in a vein of silver at Rocky Point Mine in Gillum, Colorado in 1865. Here in West Virginia, Mr. Newton Anderson found this bell inside a lump of coal. Now this bell has copper, zinc, tin, arsenic, iodine, and selenium as the components of this metal. Now that's an alloy. That's very interesting. I'm sure it has some good properties. It's been in coal and is extremely well preserved. No rusting going on. Now, coal, according to evolutionary time scale, would put it 250 million years ago. That would be a problem. In 1880, J.D. Whitney said they found a place with advanced stone tools in this one gold mine. Found it deep in the mine shaft under lava that was supposed to be 9 to 55 million years old. And in 1950, they found advanced tools in a glacier deposit in this place near Lake Huron, dated 60,000 to 125,000 years old. The director of the museum was fired for not firing the person who discovered it. It would have forced the rewriting of almost every book in the business. I don't think they're out to save trees. I think they're out to save their theory, which there's plenty of evidence to show the theory has serious flaws. Here's a clay doll found in a well. This is a zinc and silver. It is about 4.5 inches tall in rock that was dated at 600 million years old. In a lump of coal, we found a 10-inch gold chain. Now, the London hammer, I got to hurry. The London hammer is an amazing piece of work. It was found in 400 million year old rock, supposedly, and it was found in London, Texas. It's about a 6-sided, it's kind of a delicate instrument, but it basically didn't rust much. Now, there was a little bit of rust on it. They tested it. It was FeO. Normally, rust is FeO2, iron oxide. You can't form that in this atmosphere, but under double atmospheric pressure, you can actually form FeO. Battelle Labs analyzed this piece of iron, and it was 96.6% iron, 2.6% chlorine, and 0.74% sulfur. That's actually an amazingly low sulfur content. But you know, when we make iron, if we want to make it really tough, we might add carbon to it, and we'll call that carbon steel. This is chlorine steel. You know, you can't form chlorine steel in our atmosphere. But in double atmospheric pressure, you can actually get these to combine. Very interesting. Oh, I should mention the handle was partially turned to coal. Here's the Kosovo artifact found in 1961 embedded in rock. And there's an x-ray of it. This x-ray looks strikingly like a 1920s Champion spark plug. Here's a finger that was found in a coal deposit. You can see the fingernail. It's fossilized. We find a lot of things in coal, actually. There's a human skull, jawbone, molars, leg. We find a lot of stuff in coal. Here's a handprint that was found in Glen Rose. Now, this handprint was interesting because they did a silicone mold of the handprint, and they pulled out the silicone and discovered that the middle finger there looked like it had manicured cuticles. This is not primitive people. So what have we seen? We've seen Noah's Ark, they think we found it. We found flood legends that are all over the world. We found Chinese characters that seem to point to the flood. We saw a number of things like the dyad, hyperbaric chamber, more oxygen, less UV and X-rays, things that will make you live longer. We also saw dinosaur and human prints together. So we have really done a good job here, I hope, to show you that evolution is not true. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, thou that killest the prophets and stonest them that are sent unto thee, how often would I have gathered thy children together, even as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and ye would not. Do you hear the pleading of the Savior? That's a crying God, asking, hoping that you will want to be saved. Well, the next session, and my last, is going to be the heart of creation. We'll look at design. We'll try to validate the Bible. We'll look at creation's blessings, and we'll look at the fruits of the two theories. And then we'll look at what you can do. Let's bow our heads. Heavenly Father, we praise your name. We see the greatness and the truth of your word. We ask that you come into each of our hearts. Lead us to you, the Creator.